Okay, welcome everybody. It's been a while since I've made a video, and one of the reasons has been a poor performing MacBook and a Windows PC that was very slow, and it was kind of quite frustrating doing the whole thing. And so I decided to upgrade, and this is what we upgraded to. So this video is about my build of a new PC, and she's a beast, an absolute beast. Look, I'll get quite close, and she runs quite quiet as well, considering the horsepower that's inside this beast. So let's get into it. I've got a few notes because just to kind of go through and just a bit of structure to it, because it's been a while since I've done this. So so the last time I built a PC, I think, was around about 1995, 1997. And I think it was a Pentium of some sort of Pentium, Intel Pentium PC. And I have to say, it wasn't successful at all. I seem to remember that when I built this thing, the only way I could stop it shutting down was by leaving the side panels off, because it used to get so hot, and I think the only way it ran was with, as I say, both sides open. So it was completely hopeless, and it lasted about a year, I think, before it kind of met its demise. So I don't have a legacy of building PCs that end up being something successful. So deciding to build my own PC was quite an adventure, quite a big decision, really, to do that. And I think really what it does do is give you an idea of my skill set. But the reason I had to take the sides off the old PC was a schoolboy error, really, because when I built it, I'm going to have to tell you, I forgot to put, because I didn't know, the thermal paste between the heatsink and the processor. And I just didn't know why. It was overheating, basically. So anyway, fast forward, it's 2020, and I've learned a few things. I've not built any more PCs, but I like to think I'm a little bit more mechanically astute, but not in any great detail. So this was still going to be a bit of an adventure to do this. So anyway, that's the background. So let's get into it and talk about the what the actual build was, I guess, and fast forward to today. So as I say, the reason I wanted to do this was because the kit I was using, I guess more recently, it was hard work. It was making the whole kind of video thing not very enjoyable, and everything was just taking so long. So I kind of got a bit fed up with the whole thing, and I wanted something that did gaming, but specifically something that would work the new Microsoft Flight Simulator that's coming out, because that's just the sort of gaming sort of thing that I do. So I was looking for two things. It had to do gaming in a good way and be powerful enough to do big scenery files, which are used in flight simulation, and to be able to do video editing without really struggling too much, and to be able to do 4K video editing. Although I don't film in 4K at the moment, it's something that I might want to do in the future. So I had a friend who helped me spec out the PC, and I was kicking around with something like the 3700, I think it was, the AMD, and I think it was a Cooler Master kind of case. So I'd done some basic specs, and we'd kind of worked out, I'd spoken to a few people, what would be a good compromise, because gaming and video editing, there's slightly different requirements. One's GPU intensive and sometimes memory intensive, and the other one is just more kind of memory intensive for different tasks. So it was kind of striking a happy medium between the two. But between actually speccing out the PC, and so this was January of this year, obviously things happened, and between speccing out the PC and deciding to buy, some things happened in the marketplace where I built a list on Amazon just to keep a track of the prices, where the prices were really going up almost on a weekly basis for most of the components that I'd chosen to put in the PC. There was a couple of weeks, I think, where they dropped a bit, but in general, the prices were increasing and the availability was becoming less and less because manufacturing in China has basically stopped, or had stopped at the time. So I was kind of in that dilemma where what I was going to buy was going to be more expensive, and my choice between components was limited because of availability. So the spec that I'd originally come to was out the window, really, because I couldn't get most of the component parts that were on that list. So where did I end up? Let's go through the components then. So let's start with the case. So I went for the I think it's NZXT. I'd call it NZ, being in the UK, but I think it's NZXT. And this is the 710, not the 710i. The 710i comes with, I think it's a controller for LEDs and that kind of thing. I wasn't really looking for too much LED, but I wanted some. So I went for this case, and I've got to tell you, this case has been a dream to build with. The two sides just basically pop off. This is a glass side, which I've taken off because there'd be too much reflection, and the back just pop off so easily. So I cannot recommend this enough enough for building a PC. But there's a couple of things about it that I think are quite important to know, which I kind of found out during my research. So the vents here take the air in and push the air out. And it's more, I think, of what is described as a brute force cooling in this case, because this is solid on the front. A lot of cases have 3 big fans at the front, and you have a whole bunch of airflow that goes through the machine. This case sucks in through here and out through here and then out through the back. And there's a filter on the front, which is very good. And then underneath the fan where the power supply is, there's also a filter there. So that's really very good. This brace comes out, and I took that out when I built the PC because it was just much easier to do the cable management by taking that out. I don't think you have to do that. I think you can actually do it with that in there, so that's fine. And one of the things about this case that I think that is really difficult is to get the front panel and the top panel off. So you have to take the front panel off to install the fans and the radiator, which is here, and then there's 3 fans underneath here that you'll need to get to some screws with. Now, you basically squeeze these small lugs in here, both sides, and it pops off. And that sounds really simple, but it's not that simple at all. These lugs are really difficult to squeeze in, and I saw a video where someone else built one of these, or a similar case to this, same fitting, and they literally just yanked it off. And you really run the risk of bending these sheets of, I guess they're steel, powder coated steel, because they're not really that strong. And what I discovered was using a kind of 8mm, I guess it's a socket. And what I discovered was if you push this up, give it a good push, you see that lift there? There you go. It actually squeezes the lugs in and pushes them up. So that's an 8mm socket. That works really well. So if you do build one of these cases, somehow get one of those or something like that to push up. So yeah, that's the H710 from NZXT, and it is absolutely brilliant. Really, really pleased with the choice of that. Not disappointed in any way with the case. I think it looks great. I like the fact that it's mainly black inside, and with most of the components as well, I think it looks really good. Okay, let's crack on. So one of the things I went for was again the NZXT power supply, PSU. And this was one of the victims, or one of the benefits, I think, actually, in the end, of availability, because I did have I think it was the Corsair 850i, I think it was, but availability wise, it wasn't available. And so I managed to find one of these in a local supplier, and I'm not disappointed at all. One of the things this does have, because of recording, although it's not switched on today, is a switch to turn off the fan on the power supply. So that was really good, really pleased with that. I think it's good actually to have the NZXT power supply. It did have some good reviews in it, I don't think it's made by NZXT. I think it's made by another manufacturer for NZXT, and they just brand it. But it's good, it's quiet. And what I did basically into the power supply, into the PSU, was to have, what did I put in there? So you've got the 24 pin that goes to the motherboard. You've got the power supply that goes to the motherboard. I had two PCI cables, one that went to the graphics card, then I had one plugged in that doesn't go anywhere at the moment, just in case I decide to expand the PCI in some way. And then I had a SATA cable plugged in, which powers the SSD drive, which is fitted on the back, and then another SATA cable which is plugged in just in case I want another one in the future. So that just means I don't have to yank out the power supply to put in these extra cables. So that seemed to work really well. So that's the power supply, the NZXT C850. It works, power gets to the computer, and it's nice and quiet. Can't say much more than that about it, really. Okay, what's next? So we've got the power supply and the case, both NZXT, and then for cooling, whatever you want to call it, again, I went for the NZXT. I like the colour. The colour's great. That's how to choose gear, not on whether it performs very well, but whether you like the colour of the packaging or not. Don't take any notice of the purple behind me. It's not that I like the colour purple or the purple in my t-shirt. I didn't choose it because of... Why not? I mean, it's hard enough trying to spec the PC anyway. Why not just choose your gear by colour? That's not why I went for it. I read the reviews, and I have to say, the Kraken X73, which is basically, I think it's three, are they 320 fans or 360? I think they're 360. Three 360mm fans and a radiator as well. I still can't get my head around the idea that you put water anywhere near, or some sort of coolant anywhere near the insides of one of these. But I managed to get over that. Now, one of the things we need to talk about this case and this cooler and the motherboard I've got in there. First thing I did, because I was waiting for the motherboard to be delivered, was to set out the radiator in the top, because in the diagram, that's what this says to do, inside in the instructions. So I set out the radiator, and then I had the fans bolted into the radiator, so they push the air through the radiator. That's all good stuff. The motherboard I've got, which we'll come on to in a minute, which is the Corsair 8 Hero. When I've got the motherboard fitted, I had all that fitted in, I'd already set out the cooling system. When I went to lay that in, which it fits ever so nicely into the top of this, just drops straight in, perfect, except because of the depth of the Kraken and the fans, it wouldn't actually set into the recess. I'm talking about the radiator and the fan unit when it's all compiled together. So it just wouldn't push down. And the reason is the top of the Crosshair motherboard has got a whole bunch of enclosed connectors, and that's one of the reasons why I went for it, but I'll come on to that in a minute. But it wouldn't fit in, so I had to take that apart. That was the assembly of the radiators and the three fans, and change to having the radiator mounted on the front of the case. And the reason for that was because of it not fitting on the top. However, as I was building this, the radiator and fan setup, I was actually looking at some research that did say that marginally there's a gain of having the radiator on the front of the PC. It's something to do with the airflow. I don't claim to understand it at all, but that seemed to be a thing. Now, inadvertently, because it didn't fit on the top, I had to strip that down and then reassemble the radiator and the fans on the front of the PC. Couple of things about that. Really annoyed myself when I did it, because on the front of or on the back of the fans is the NZXT logo, and when I put all this together, I didn't have them all facing the same way, so I was a bit sad about that, but never mind, I did fix that later. What I found was, it seems to be that a better way to do it because of airflow, and do correct me in the comments if this isn't right, I'm a noob, fine, I'll take it on the chin, is it's better to pull the air through the radiator. And that does make a bit of sense, because if you're pushing the air through the radiator, it's likely that some of the air won't make it through the radiator and get pushed off to the sides, because these aren't sealed, these with the joint between the radiator and the fans. And it kind of makes sense, if you're pulling it through, you're literally pulling the air through the radiator rather than trying to push it through. So I ended up with the radiator on the front of the case, not a problem. And one of the things that there is a filter on the front of this, inside this front plate. What I found was that once I'd put the screws in to have the radiator here, the filter didn't clip on properly. So holding my filter in place is a bit of tape. I don't know, did I assemble it wrong, or is that just a thing to do with having this radiator in this case? Don't know. And you won't have missed the fantastic logo that is, and you can sync all of these LEDs between the motherboard and the GPU and the cooler pump as well. They're not connected, you have to do it manually between different bits of software. So I found, if there's a better way of doing it, let me know. But anyway, that's how I done that. So far we've got the case, we've got the C850 power supply and the Kraken X73 cooler. In general use, the temperatures don't get much above 55. Now I don't know much about cooling, don't know if that's good, don't know if that's bad, but I've got the fans on silent and it pretty much is silent. It's not, you can probably hear it a little bit now, but obviously the sides are off, but it does run super quiet. What I will say is, when I first turned this on, it made a horrendous noise, absolutely horrendous. And I was so disappointed. There was two things. I was absolutely elated that it started, because I hadn't done one of these before. And that was quickly followed up by, oh, this is a bit noisy. And the reason it was noisy is because I'd not plugged the fans, 3 here, 3 on the top, 1 at the back, into the right connectors on the motherboard. So I think what was happening is they were just gunning it, full gun, because these 3 here were plugged in separately. The day after I built it, I got a kind of 3-way connector and then plugged these 3 into, I think you call it Charfan 3. These 3 again are into a 3-way connector and going to Charfan 2, and this is in Charfan 1. So they're the main motherboards, and they're controllable, and you can set different profiles for the whole kind of thing. And this is currently running on silent, and it's much better than it was when I turned it on. Okay, so we've got the case, we've got the power supply, and we've got the Kraken X73. And oh, one more thing about the X73. Guess what it has on it? It has the thermal paste. And I was really worried about having to apply that. And of course, taking in mind my previous history with thermal paste, or not having it, that was something I didn't realize until I started building it. Okay, right, let's start to talk about the meat and the bones. This is the Crosshair 8 Hero. So I kind of, the motherboard thing was a bit of an issue. I couldn't decide what to go for because there is so much choice. And in the end, after my research, knowing that the current generation of Ryzen 9s is going to be superseded soon, I just wanted to know that I would probably get at least one more generation of processors out of the motherboard. So the X570 type of motherboard, do you know what? I don't really know what that means, other than it's the right one for this processor that I bought, and it has some longevity in terms of it will take the new processor as well. So that's why I went for that. And then secondly is an absolute ton of USB controllers. Now, I think I was saying that one of the things that I do is flight simulator stuff, and there are so many extra bits that are plugged into the PC. And there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 USB connectors on this PC. And it goes through the whole range up to 3.2, I think it is, on USB-C. So I think, look, I'm really pleased with this. I think it's just enough LED in terms of you've got the Hero symbol there. There's another one underneath the graphics card that you probably can't see. And I think the other standout feature of this is the way it does its power management, and the audio is quite good as well. But in general, you know, choosing the motherboard was really a simple choice of, does it have that longevity of life? Will it take the next generation of chips? And does it have the right amount of USB connectors that I was looking for? And then the other thing I didn't do, there's a Wi-Fi version of this as well, and I'm denied about that. And this is another kind of casualty of availability. I probably would have gone for the Wi-Fi one. There's two things. It was a bit dearer, I think by about another £60. I can't justify it. You can get a Wi-Fi card for 20 something, probably not as good. And availability. So I ended up without the Wi-Fi, but that's okay. And I don't miss it really. I don't feel like I've made a mistake with that. And installing this was a breeze. And one thing about this board to remember is it comes with the back plate already fitted. So no faffing around with the back plate where all the connectors are, because it comes fitted. It's a bit like the thermal paste on the Kraken. Genius. For someone like a newbie like me building a PC, that was absolutely brilliant. Okay, more bits. So I went for the Corsair Vengeance LPX, and I went for 64 gigabytes with 3600 megahertz memory. So pretty powerful stuff really, quite pleased with that. And no problem with that at all, just slot it in, no problem. So easy, can't say. It's almost one of those things where you think, I'm really scared about putting this in, am I going to do this right? And it, click, straight in. Too easy, absolutely too easy. Okay, let's talk about the motherboard, sorry, not the motherboard, the processor that I went with. So I went with the 3950X. It's a beast. The price of this was going up daily, so I had to make a bit of a decision about that. Can't really talk about how much I paid for that because it makes me sweat thinking about it. But it chews up the video rendering. I've got some results that I'll put on the screen in a bit that I did a bit of benchmarking, don't fully understand it, but you know, it's one of those things where I did start off looking at the 3700, and then you fall into that trap of more power, and if you've got the budget to do it, which I fortunately did have at the time, although I did go over my budget by about £500, I think, total build on the end, which is a big difference, but that was down to the fact that everything seemed to be going up in price. The thing about power, you don't get people saying we need less teeth. You don't get people saying we need a smaller boat. And you don't get Lewis Hamilton saying, listen guys, put me in a less powerful engine. We need a bigger boat, we need more teeth, and Lewis Hamilton needs the bigger engine. It's as simple as that. Go for the best processor that you can afford. And obviously you've got to tie it up with the right stuff, and I think I got a bit lucky with that. I did do my research, but I think in general, there was an element in luck of getting some of this stuff right, that it all worked together. So I went for the Ryzen 9 3950X, and I think that's a 16 core 32 thread. 16 core 32 thread. Powerful stuff. Okay, right, so let's talk about storage. So on this board, one of the other features that it has is the 4x4 M2. So there's two slots, and that is basically motherboard storage. That's how I think of it anyway. So I went for the Sabrent Rocket NVMe 4. So that makes the best use of the M2 sockets that are on this board. So basically, I've gone for two of these, which is one 500 gigabyte, which does the applications. So my operating system stored on there, and my applications like Flight Simulator X, and also Premiere Pro, Photoshop, those sorts of things are stored on the application and OS drive. and then I went for another 500 gigabyte drive, which is I think I was saying that on the flight simulator stuff, there is something like 250 gigabyte of scenery, photorealistic scenery. So I've got a second drive on the board, which is basically holding the cache for Premiere and also the scenery for the flight simulator. So it seems to work. My understanding is that basically the application can then load as quicker because it's pulling the application from here, and then also the scenery files are coming in parallel rather than in serial from a different drive. Do I really understand it? No, I don't. Am I happy with it? Very, because to give you some idea, my old laptop that I used to start my flight simulator with took from start to being able to fly the aircraft was 9.5 minutes. This puppy, less than 1. Same program, same scenery, same aircraft, and it's just, the difference is huge. So on the storage then, we've got the two 500 gigabytes M2 drives, and then I've got a Crucial SSD. Now I wanted to get the Samsung one, and I wanted to get a 2 terabyte one, but in effect they weren't available when I was buying all the kit. So I went for the Crucial SSD, and that's bolted on the back. I'll put a picture up now of that, and it's just so clean. I mean, there isn't a mechanical hard drive in this machine at all, so it's just amazing how all this plugs together, really. Being able to plug the hard drives, SSDs, into the board just makes it so much cleaner. And so we've got one under the pump there, and then another one just underneath the graphics card as well. So how this works then is, first drive is operating system applications, second drive is cache and other sort of ancillary files that work with applications, and then this is my project drive. So that's 1 terabyte, and basically when I've finished working with things in there, they get dumped off onto external storage drives. So that's just the instructions, just so you know that's not the actual card. So how are we doing? So we've got case, power supply, cooling, motherboard, processor and storage. Looking good so far. Graphics card. I went for the EVGA, and that's not because I liked manufacturers that had 4-letter acronyms, NZXT and EVGA. So this is the EVGA 2080TI, and it's the 11 gigabyte for the VIII. It's a monster. It's a monster. For rendering, I think Premiere Pro, graphic intensive effects, this will be amazing, so I'm told. That's what I read anyway. So where are we? So I think that is probably about it. So we've got memory. Yeah, and I think that sums it up. It sums up the build. As I say, there's a couple of tips in there if you are thinking of building one of these. I'm a big fan of NZXT. If I were to do a build again tomorrow, and okay, I've not had the experience of working with other cases recently, other than as basically a noob and as somebody who's completely cocked up a PC build before, this was a dream to work with. And I guess in terms of tips, what I would say, if you decide to make your own PC, that the satisfaction of when you turn it on and it works is absolutely amazing. I felt so good about it. It was just so pleasing to have done. I would say, do your research. I think, what would I do differently? I probably could have got a less powerful graphics card, and I probably could have got a less powerful processor. But it comes down to what I was saying before about Nobody wanted a smaller boat and less teeth. And I was able to get that, and I was kind of forced to get these because of availability at the time. So it's just one of those things that kind of happily came together, but had a bit more expense than what I was looking to have. I would say take your time. I built this over, I think it was probably over about 4 days. And I know I could have probably done it in 4 hours. But one of the things that saved me was the motherboard was delayed from one of the manufacturers or suppliers that I chose, and I had to get this from another supplier in the end. But because it was delayed, I was able to spend a bit of time positioning stuff, except the motherboard of course, but building the fan and the cooling system and just getting more familiar with the case. And the cabling on the back, I'll put a picture of that up on the screen now, and just getting used to how I might actually do the cable running. And it just gave me a bit of extra time to do it. So I would say take your time if you're going to do it. This is brilliant because the cooling's brilliant because it's got the paste on it. And yeah, I'm very pleased. So look, I'll pop the details down below just in case you're interested in buying any of it. Anything you do buy, of course, I'll make a couple of pence on it, keeps the channel going. And hopefully now I've got this, I can do a bit more video and a bit more kind of review stuff. So I might do individual reviews on this stuff, but I think I've covered most of it in this video. But yeah, looking forward to actually working this beast of a machine and seeing what I can get out of it. So look, thanks for watching. If you've got any questions about the build, bear in mind I'm a noob, I don't really know what I'm doing. But ultimately, probably through brute force and power, I've ended up with a really nice machine, and I'm very pleased. Thank you for watching.